63-year-old Helen Margaret Brooks lived in Apple Valley, California in 1985. She was a well-liked woman who modeled for Lolo's fashion boutique at the Apple Valley Inn. On July 5, 1985, Helen's friends and co-workers became alarmed after not hearing from her in a few days. They then went to her home in Apple Valley Gardens Apartments. Inside of her apartment, they found Helen's body. She had been strangled. Investigators collected DNA evidence from the scene, but were limited to the DNA technology of the time. Investigators learned that 37-year-old Robert Eugene Wortman met Helen in the days prior to her life being taken, and was in her apartment between July 3rd and July 5th. Wortman was interviewed by investigators. He said that he had no knowledge of what happened to Helen and denied he went into her apartment. Investigators could not prove that he was responsible in any way, so the case went cold for many years. Over the years, several interviews and polygraph tests were conducted, but it did not bring investigators any closer to solving the case. In 2009, cold case detectives re-examined the case and submitted items for DNA testing. A DNA profile for the suspect was developed, but did not match anyone in the DNA database. In 2021, investigators partnered with the FBI and made use of more advanced DNA technology. Finally, in 2022, they were able to confirm that Robert Eugene Wortman was indeed responsible for what happened to Helen. They found that he had quite an extensive violent criminal history in the years since he ended Helen's life. In August 1985, Wortman was arrested on suspicion of attempting to assault a woman at the Cocky Bull restaurant and bar on Highway 395 in Victorville. In 1991, a jury convicted him of assaulting a different woman at a bar in Apple Valley. In 1995, Wortman passed away while in prison, serving his 22-year sentence. Investigators are sure that he is involved in many other crimes, and it is now being investigated. "41-year-old Rose Marie Moniz lived in Bristol County, Massachusetts. On March 23, 2001, Rose's father entered her home to pick her up for a doctor's appointment. He found her body on the bathroom floor and called the police. Investigators found that her purse was emptied out on the floor and an undetermined amount of cash was stolen. The autopsy report described significant trauma to her head, including skull fractures. The weapons used to inflict the injuries were a seashell, fireplace poker, and a cast iron kettle. Because of the money stolen from her, police theorized that the motive was burglary. There was, however, no sign of forced entry into the home. This possibly meant that Rose knew her attacker. Investigators found DNA on the seashell, but DNA was not advanced enough yet to test it. In 2019, investigators with the DA's office and state police took another look at Rose's case. They figured that because the seashell's spiky exterior made contact with her, then the culprit most likely put his fingers inside the shell to hold it. Authorities then finally found sufficient DNA for them to create a DNA profile. They were then able to confirm that the DNA belonged to David Reed. He is Rose's half-brother. He also served as a pallbearer at her funeral. Officials say that he beat a woman on June 10, 2003, while she was seated in his truck. He then shoved her out of his vehicle, stole her pocketbook, and left her in New Bedford, Massachusetts. The woman pressed charges and police set out to find Reed. More than a month later, during a police chase, Reed rammed his truck into a law enforcement car, injuring an officer. Cops caught up, but he fled Massachusetts before the trial in 2004. Reed lived on the run for a decade in Florida, Hawaii, and Alabama. In 2015, authorities caught him, but the charges against him had to be dropped because the woman he beat passed away 6 months earlier, and there was not enough evidence against him. He could still be charged with attempting to flee from officers, ramming his truck into a police cruiser, and bail jumping. He was sentenced to 3.5 to 4 years in prison. It was then that his DNA was taken, and why they could later match it to the DNA found on the seashell. In January of 2022, officers arrested Reed for taking his half-sister's life, and they also brought back their case regarding the woman he beat. Linda Durnall was born on April 10, 1950, in California. She married Philip LaBeau and took his last name. By 1977, the two of them divorced and Linda had a new boyfriend. She stayed with the new boyfriend in Tustin, California. On October 6th, Linda met up with Philip at a restaurant to collect money he owed her for damaging her boyfriend's car. Philip slashed her boyfriend's tires and poured sugar into the gas tank, resulting in $300 worth of damages. Witnesses reported seeing her arguing with a man believed to be Philip LaBeau at a nearby gas station, and she was never seen again. Linda's boyfriend called police to report her missing when she did not arrive back home. Investigators considered Philip a suspect, but could not prove that he had any involvement in her disappearance. In 1986, a woman's body was found down an embankment along the Ortega Highway in Lake Elsinore by highway surveyors. Investigators determined that the victim had been shot in the head, but they could not identify the remains. In August of 2021, investigators exhumed several sets of remains trying to see if one of them matched the woman found in 1986. Linda's remains were identified as a match in January 2022, and it was confirmed that the remains belonged to her. She was just 27 years old when her life was taken. Philip LaBeau passed away in 2008, which makes it even harder to prove that he is responsible, but investigators are still working on the case.